Yeah, this is part 2 of our 4-part series. This one here, we're going to have Mimi Enright speak to us about defensible space zones and code requirements. And then a reminder that next month, we will have part 3, which will be Firewise design within a defensible space. That's on October 15th, and on October 22nd, we'll be presenting part 4, maintenance in the defensible space zone. And now it feels like there's a lot of us in here. I just want to remind everybody that today is the anniversary of the Tubbs fire, October 8, 2017. So if you want to take a moment to reflect on that, feel free. In the meantime, I'll introduce myself. My name is Roberta McIntyre, and I'm President and CEO of Fire Safe Sonoma, Sonoma County's countywide Fire Safe Council. We've been working in the wildland fire safety and risk reduction space for 26 years now. And several years ago, I think in 2019, we became a collaborative partner in what we call the Resilient Landscape Coalition. If you probably already know about it since you're here, but if you know of anybody who doesn't know about it, please share out. So thanks very much. And so the Resilient Landscape Coalition consists of Fire Safe Sonoma, again, as a collaborative member, Habitat Corridor Project, and there's 2 folks here representing that organization as one of the participating collaborators of the RLC, April Owens and Jennifer Roberts, and they'll be panelists to help field questions in the Q&A. Also, we are a partner entity with Sonoma Ecology Center, and our people that are from the SEC that are, movers and shakers in terms of the coalition are Eric Scholes, Caitlin Cornwell, Ellie Inslee, who is here today, as well as Rachel Bean, who is also here today as panelists. And then we would not be complete without the UC Master Gardener program as another collaborator. And with us today is Mimi Enright and Jennifer Roberts. And Mimi Enright is the expert who's going to be doing the presentation for us tonight. And all this would not be possible without assistance from Sonoma County Fire Prevention Division, as well as CAL FIRE and our local fire departments who we collaborate with often. And probably most importantly, the County of Sonoma Vegetation Management funding we received from Sonoma County Ag and Open Space. Without that funding, this presentation and none of these presentations would be possible. So with that, next slide, I think I have one more slide. Yes. So as we start this off, little something to think about. What are the top 1 or 2 questions, dilemmas, or trade-offs you are facing when you think about taking care of the land? And as you're contemplating that, I'm going to go dark and hand it off to Mimi Enright. You have the floor, Mimi.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Roberta. Really appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad you're joining us tonight for part 2 of our 4-part series this month, during the month of October. And it does feel, I appreciate that Roberta raised that it's the anniversary of the Tubbs fire. And I kind of feel like before that, there were a few folks who were voicing the work that we needed to be doing in this space to be prepared for future wildfires. But certainly that was a wake-up call for many of us. We hope that you take the content that we're sharing in our series to heart. The work that we do matters in protecting our homes and properties, as well as our neighbors and our communities' homes and properties, and makes hopefully the job for our wonderful firefighters a little easier as well. So my name is Mimi Enright, and I'm the program coordinator for the UC Master Gardener program here in Sonoma County. We were one of the founding organizations of the Resilient Landscapes Coalition, and have been very honored to be doing outreach with our partners in this work for over 5 years now. hopefully you all are familiar with the Master Gardener program. We operate as agents of the University of California. We're an all volunteer based program. Our volunteers go through extensive training on horticultural topics. And then we do educational outreach to the community. And we've been serving in a role as the science advisor for the Resilient Landscapes Coalition since its inception. So much of the information we're sharing with you is based on scientific research. And that is gratefully, there's a lot of exciting work going on in that regard in this space. So as we get new information, we'll certainly be sharing it in future presentations with you. So today, I'm going to start off by discussing fire exposures, then briefly touch on plants and plant spacing, and then do a deeper dive into the defensible space recommendations. So those are the recommendations of what you should be doing in each of the 3 defensible space zones, which makes up the 0 to 100 foot perimeter around our homes and structures. So hopefully you're all familiar with the fire triangle. Fire requires 3 components, and that is fuel, oxygen, and heat. And which of these 3 can we control? Of course, the only component that we can manage is the fuel component. So a step beyond the fire triangle concept is the fire behavior, which is made up of fuel, weather, and topography. And again, the only component that we can have any influence on, it would be the fuel component. So that's what we want to be focusing on in our home environments. So fuel is very basically anything that will burn. And in our landscapes, that certainly can be the vegetation, the plant materials, mulch materials, if it's organic, certainly fencing, furniture, wood furniture, arbors, trellises, planter boxes, all of these potentially could be fuel in a fire. And we need to be keeping an eye to how we're placing and managing all these components in our home landscapes to better be able to defend our homes. So here are some excellent visuals that are relatively recently developed that show the 3 different types of fire exposures that we can be exposed to during a wildfire event. What's newer information for us is how we can prepare for each of these different types of fire exposures, whether it's direct flame content, right, which is kind of, I think, classically what most of the educational outreach has been focused on in terms of reducing direct flame content through creation of defensible space. That's really where the whole concept of defensible space came from, was helping reduce the risk of direct flame contact to our homes and structures. As we have all too much painful experience with here in Sonoma County is the embers fire exposure, and preparing for that fire exposure and for the radiant heat fire exposure, which is depicted here on the right. This is showing radiant heat, for example, from a burning tool shed in relatively close proximity to a home can transmit that risk of fire to your home or structure. And preparing for an ember fire exposure or radiant heat fire exposure takes some slightly different approaches than preparing for direct flame contact. So those approaches involved for direct flame contact, that defensible space implementation. And the intent here is to interrupt the flow of fire to your home or structures and reduce the potential for that direct flame contact to your structures. For embers, our strategy involves home hardening coupled with defensible space, which can help mitigate our ember exposure risk. And for radiant heat, it involves home hardening and overall fuel reduction to help address potential radiant heat fire exposure. So this is an excellent picture taken by the LA Times, showing a firefighter working to put out spot fires from embers. What's particularly interesting in this photo is you can look at those corners, that corner in the upper right of that photo, and it's showing you how those embers can swirl within the spaces in close proximity to the home. And this is the reason, this is the whole foundation for the relatively recent development of the what's called Zone 0 in defensible space, or the 0 to 5 foot zone around the perimeter of your structures and attached decks. And especially for those of us in high fire or very high fire severity zone areas, or adjacent to the wildland urban interface, we need to be paying particular attention to implementation of Zone 0, but really it's good context for all of us to consider in our risk management in better preparation for future wildfires. Okay, so let's dive into some really basic principles of defensible space. So you want to start at the house and work out from there. So that means you want to start with your home hardening. We're not going to talk about home hardening today. We're just focusing on the landscape, but there's lots of incredible resources out there for you, including some from the University of California on best home hardening practices. So you want to start there and then work out from your home into your defensible space zones. You want to be removing all dead or dying plants and branches on an ongoing basis. You want to remove ladder fuels. We'll be talking in some more detail about what constitutes a ladder fuel in your home landscape. The recommendation is to create islands of plantings, optimally with non-combustible paths between them, again, breaking up the flow of the potential of fire reaching your homes and structures. You want to avoid planting or using organic mulch close to your structures. We'll talk about that in some detail when we talk about Zone 0. And really, ongoing maintenance is really critical. You can't plant a landscape and walk away. We need to be doing ongoing and regular maintenance of that landscape, whether it's ensuring proper irrigation or appropriate pruning and cleaning out of dead branches and dying plants or materials. And our colleague Jen Roberts is going to do a great session for you in workshop 4, going into depth for you on what the recommendations are from a maintenance perspective. Okay, so let's move to some spacing guidelines. So you want to apply, there's concept 2 key principles in spacing, and those are horizontal and vertical spacing. So those are key principles to understand in defensible space. So this visual is depicting horizontal spacing. So remember, we talked about those islands or plant groupings, and you want to have those separated by some space. And the recommendations, of course, for what that space separation should be, increase with increased slope on your property. So for a less than 20% slope, which is depicted in this top part of this visual on the left, you want to have 2 times the height of the outside shrubs of that plant grouping between those, that's the separation you want between those 2 plant groupings. So say the shrubs on the outside perimeter of these plant groupings are each about 2 feet in height. Then that means if you have less than a 20% slope, you want to have 4 feet separation optimally between those plant groupings. And then again, that increases with increased steepness of your slopes. For your horizontal spacing, in this case, we're depicting the tree, suggested tree spacing, horizontal spacing. This does come from fire officials. And again, on the lesser slope, less than 20%, the recommendation is for 10 feet of horizontal spacing between those trees. And again, that increases with increased slope. For vertical spacing, you want to make sure you're avoiding ladder fuels, that concept that I talked about a little bit earlier. And hopefully you're all familiar with the concept. In this visual on the far right of this graphic, that's showing the impact of having ladder fuels under trees and how readily those can transmit fire from the ground plane up into the tree canopy. So the recommendation is that you want to have all of your trees limbed up 6 feet from the ground plane. And if you have any shrubs or ground covers underneath your trees, that you want to allow 3 times the height of that shrub to the lowest tree limb. So in this case, let's say that this shrub on the ground in the middle of this visual depiction is 2 feet in height. Then again, that would mean that 3 times that 2 feet in height would be 6 feet of separation you want from the top of that shrub to the bottom of that tree canopy. So in general, we should be avoiding planting shrubs under trees. But again, if you do, you want to make sure you have that separation to avoid ladder fuels and transmitting fire into the canopies. Okay, so let's talk about plant selection and plant placement. And again, our colleague April Owens is going to be going into depth on the topic of plant selection for you in our next workshop in the series next Tuesday. But I really want to stress to you all tonight that there is no such thing as fire-resistant landscaping. The University of California does not advocate for fire-resistant plant lists. You can find some out there, but the reality is that all plants can burn. So what's much more important is that we consider the selection of a plant, consider where we're placing it in our garden environment, and then maintaining it appropriate through its lifespan. So this upper picture here in this visual shows a shrub that has some dead branch material in it and is rather dense with growth, and shows you on the right how with appropriate pruning and management of that, you can make that safer in your defensible space. Again, April's going to go into great detail on plant selection and placement in her presentation next week. And then Jen will be talking about the maintenance of those plant materials in 2 weeks. So come on back for those sessions if you want to dive into those topics in more depth, which are really, really important from a defensible space consideration. Okay, so let's dive into the 3 defensible space zones. And again, I want to highlight that it's very important. You want to start with your house, with your home hardening, and then you want to work out from there through the 3 defensible space zones. So the first defensible space zone is zone 0, which is also called the non-combustible zone, right? It's your ember defense zone. That's why that zone was created and introduced into the defensible space recommendations just a few years ago. And that zone encompasses 0 to 5 feet from the house and any attached deck, but it also includes 6 inches vertical clearance around the house. So 6 inches up the exterior of your wall foundation. Zone 1 is called the intermediate zone, and that's the 5 to 30 foot zone around your home and structures. And zone 2 is the extended zone from 30 to 100 feet. Okay, so once again, I want to stress that zone 0 is a really critical component of structure defense. And when we couple that with zones 1 and 2, it's really essential to defensible space. So again, zone 0 is about reducing the likelihood of structure ignition from embers landing in organic debris or matter around your homes, and then transmitting fire directly into your home. And let's talk in a bit more detail about what that looks like. So optimally, you want to eliminate or at least minimize plants and other flammable materials in this zone. If you absolutely have to have plants in this zone, you want to be selecting low perennial, which means non-woody or succulent plants. And you absolutely do not want to have any plant materials under windows or in corners of your home structure. What happens is if you're going to keep plants in this zone, you want to be maintaining them vigilantly, especially during fire season. And a lot of the challenge and issue is that, especially at this time of year, I don't know about you all, but the fall leaves are starting to fall in my home garden, and I'm going to be out there cleaning them up this weekend. But if you have plant materials around your home, those are an easy catch place for that debris and dropped leaves to gather. So that's why you have to be so vigilant about maintaining this zone during fire season, especially on red flag warning days, if you're going to have plant materials in that zone. Traditionally, we have masked what we call foundation plants or shrubs against the house. But that's really a practice that we need to be moving away from, because we need to be thinking about the type of fuel that can generate for fire in immediate proximity to our structures. So again, optimally, there should be no combustible materials in this zone. And this is especially critically important if you're adjacent to the wildland-urban interface, or WUI, or if you're in a high or very high fire severity zone. But it certainly is something that all of us should be taking into consideration, no matter the fire severity zone that we live in. There is new state legislation that was implemented called AB 3074, but it's not been fully implemented. We're still waiting for the recommendations for what Zone 0 requirements are going to be associated with that legislation. But it's certainly will apply to very high fire severity zones, and I believe possibly to high fire severity zones for those properties in the wildland urban interface. So great opportunity to get ahead of that if you can. So ideally, your Zone 0 should be hardscape or inorganic or non-combustible mulch materials. Great opportunity for us to have walkways in this zone. This is a lovely depiction in this photo from a design that our colleague April Owens did for a project using gravel and pavers. So we really need to rethink how we can create beauty in this zone, which I think we still can. From a maintenance perspective, you want to be making sure you're cleaning up any clutter and leaf debris regularly, just like I'm going to be doing this weekend in my Zone 0. I want to stress that we do recommend that trees are okay in Zone 0, but there's a couple of things you need to consider if you are going to have trees in this zone. Number one, you need to make sure you're keeping a clearance of at least 5 feet from your roof line. And you're going to need to be really vigilant about any leaf removal or debris removal from your roof and your gutters. And it is a county code requirement that we keep tree limbs at least 10 feet away from chimneys or stovepipe outlets. So if we've got trees in this zone, say you might have an existing mature tree in this zone, trees provide really incredible value from supporting wildlife, but also providing shade, which can help reduce our energy costs in the summer. But if you're going to have a tree in this zone, you're going to have to be really vigilant about your maintenance and cleaning up any clutter and leaf debris regularly during fire season. Okay, so let's move on to Zone 1, which is the 5 to 30 foot perimeter around your home and structures on your property. And again, Zone 1 reduces the likelihood of fire burning directly to the structure. And this zone also provides a really important, it's often where fire personnel will be staging. If you're lucky enough to have fire personnel defending your home during a wildfire, it's likely where they'll be staging and taking action to defend your home. So you want to keep that in mind for fire personnel to have ease of access in that space. So again, our recommendation is that you plant in islands or plant groupings that are separated by pathways, again, ideally inorganic materials such as gravel that helps break up the path, the flow of that fire to structures. And you want to rely mostly on smaller shrubs or really ideally perennials, those non-woody plant materials, to a maximum of 3 feet in height. So mulch or organic mulch, it's organic, so it's flammable. If you use a wood mulch, it's very important from a water conservation and a soil health perspective. So you can be using mulch in this zone around your plantings, but again, optimally, you're separating those groupings of plantings with inorganic materials such as gravel. So some larger, what we call specimen or individual shrubs are okay if placed well and well maintained. And a specimen tree is okay, again, if well pruned and ladder fuels are avoided. Let's move on to zone 2. And again, that's the 30 to 100 foot perimeter around your home and adjacent structures. And the actions here are to reduce the potential behavior of an oncoming fire in such a way that it drops it from a crown in trees to the ground. So really a lot of the same recommendations as zone 1. You want to continue to focus on plant groupings, but some larger groupings are increasingly appropriate and acceptable, as well as some larger plant materials, shrubs and trees. But you want to be vigilant again on maintaining that horizontal and vertical spacing that we talked about. And then it is a Sonoma County code requirement that all annual grasses be mowed to 4 inches in height during fire season. So you want to be paying attention to that in your zone 2 as well. So this picture is showing, it was, I think from a fire possibly in Colorado, that shows fire at the ground plane, likely in some organic wood mulch, ignited a wood fence. But what prevented that fire from transmitting to the home and igniting the home from that wooden fence was implementation of this zone 0 with an inorganic rock mulch on the ground plane and a metal gate. So the recommendation is to not have wood fence and wood gate connections to a home, but to instead replace that with a metal gate, which is, of course, not flammable. Again, mulch is a really important aspect of a sustainable landscape from a weed suppression, right? Less maintenance for us and a water conservation perspective. But since wood mulches are organic and as such combustible materials which can transmit fire, it's recommended not to use mulch in a widespread or continuous manner. So again, you want to separate mulched areas with non-combustible and ignition-resistant materials, whether that's concrete or gravel, rock, or even possibly an irrigated native grass lawn strip. There have been some scientific studies on mulch combustibility. The least combustible is composted arbor mulch, right? Those chipped trees from tree service companies is a great example. Materials that we can get from landscape supply materials. You want to stay away from gorilla hair or shredded bark mulch. Embers can tend to land in that as a material and smolder and possibly reignite after firefighters have moved on to defending of their structure. And again, you'd want to use no organic mulch within the 0 to 5 foot perimeter of your house. That's incredibly important. And this picture is actually showing a don't, right? We're showing a widespread use of a shredded bark mulch in direct proximity to the home, likely under unirrigated and unmaintained juniper shrubs. Also, excellent pathway for transmitting fire up to the home. So that's a don't from a mulch perspective. Again, ongoing maintenance is essential. I just want to highlight again, you want to be removing dead and dying branches from trees and shrubs on an ongoing basis. Mow those annual grasses and weeds to 4 inches tall during fire season. Prune out any dead material from the interior of shrubs to help reduce flammability. Remove any ladder fuels in your defensible space, and probably on an every couple of year basis to be thinning and reducing your tree canopies to reduce your flammable materials as well. You want to really ensure that your family and your firefighters, who hopefully are coming to defend your home, have clear access in and out of your property. You need to maintain vegetation 10 feet from the road edge. This is showing maintenance that hasn't been done. So these annual grasses should be mowed to 4 inches. So you want to maintain this vegetation 10 feet from the road edge and then 15 feet vertically. And make sure that you have 12 feet of unobstructed pavement for passage of vehicles. So again, just to recap, in zone 0, that 0 to 5 foot perimeter around your home and structures, no organic materials. If possible, use inorganic materials optimally, such as gravel or stepping stones or concrete. In zone 1, that 5 to 30 foot perimeter around our home and structures, you want to plant in islands or groupings with materials such as low herbaceous or non-woody perennials, grasses, or succulents, and optimally, individual shrub or tree. And then in zone 2, 30 to 100 feet from your home, same basic principles as zone 1, but you can include shrub and tree groupings in widely spaced groups separated by areas, more shrubs and trees than in your zone 1, again, separated by areas that break up the spread of wildfire. So I wanted to point out to you, our team put a lot of effort into creating our Resilient Landscapes website, which offers you information and resources in English and Spanish. Highly recommend you check that out. And then we certainly hope that this has inspired you to become more intimate with your garden, but also while reducing fire risk and enhancing biodiversity. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back over to Roberta, who I think is going to chair the Q&A for us tonight.
Yes, great. Thank you very much, Mimi, for that. And I am gonna take a look at the Q&A. A couple questions came in earlier, and I hope we get more because I think we have time. What I'll do is I'll grab a question and toss it to whomever I think is the most appropriate person. Well, I'll toss it to you, Mimi, and then you can.
And then I can toss it.
Yeah, because you're the presenter, but I might take a crack at some of these, ahead of time. This is a good one for you, Mimi. When and where is leaf litter bad, or where should it be moved? For example, when is it good for biodiversity, et cetera, and should it be maintained? I ask because I have a big oak tree with years of leaf litter beneath it. I think for the most part, you want that sort of mulch under an oak tree.
Yeah, it's really important from a tree health perspective. Fantastic question, Christopher. Thank you. I'm going to lead off and then I'll turn it over to April to share as well. So I want to highlight oak trees are called keystone species because of the amazing range of insect and wildlife that are dependent and have a deep interrelationship with them for subsistence, for life. But yes, they drop a lot of leaf litter. And Christopher, I live northeast of Cloverdale. I'm in a very high fire severity zone, and I'm adjacent to the wildland urban interface. So I'm really being vigilant about all of these recommendations. And I had an oak tree that was probably about 6 feet from the house. But it provided invaluable shade in very hot Cloverdale. And unfortunately, the tree rotted and we had to have it removed. And I can't believe what a difference it's made, the loss of the tree. But it was dropping leaf litter year round. And just like you, in some areas, which were in my 5 to 30 foot zone, it was a really deep layer of leaf litter. So I was vigilant about during fire season about removing any of that leaf litter from 0 to 5 foot zone. That's critical during fire season. Off fire season, I'd say, especially if it's not hardscape and it's part around the base of the tree, based on how close that oak tree is. You know, it might be a little less risk to be leaving it. And certainly I reduced the depth of the leaf litter matter because it was in my 5 to 30. I still kept like a 2 to 3 inch layer. I didn't take it away fully because it is really critically important for the tree health. And I don't know, April, what would you add to that consideration?
Yeah, that's a perfect answer, Mimi, and thank you for your talk. It was wonderful.
Oh, thanks, April.
So I want to like harken back to hardening your home. Like I was just thinking as you were talking, like, what about a metal roof? What about, you know, I don't know, Roberta knows more about the roofing materials, but I live under an oak too now, which I never did before, and it is incredibly messy and so many acorns. I have a blue oak and a black oak and a live oak that I live under in Sebastopol. And I'm the same as you, Mimi. I lost a huge tree in the front and it's been incredibly hot in the house. So we have to think about all those parts, but that vigilance and just thinking about like, what could you put in, like what funds do you have in budget that you could replace a part of your roof, your whole roof, to be more safe to live with your oak as well? Roberta, you probably have thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I am staring out my window at a beautiful oak within 5 feet of my house that does provide a fair amount of shade. And I can't imagine it not being there. With that said, I do keep it clean underneath it, and I do have a defensible space around the oak tree as well. So I haven't been hit by my insurance company yet, knock on wood, or asking me to remove it, but I just consider it as part of my combustible structure. And honestly, I'm not an expert on oaks, but compared to what my house is made of, much softer woods and probably less fire resistant woods than the oak itself. Probably will hold up better in the fire than my house will. So that's kind of how I treat it. You know, for any of this, it's about striking a balance between getting the risk low enough to where you're comfortable with it and still having an environment you want to live in. I personally don't want to live in something that looks like San Quentin. I want to live someplace that, you know, is relatively safe, but still is a place I can enjoy from day to day. So it's reducing risk to where it fits in your level of comfort economically, financially, and emotionally, I think.
Yeah.
I like that emotional piece, Roberta. I think that's why our trees are so important to us, and we all want to try to keep them as much as we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they are, you know, part of the risk that you live with.
Yeah.
I live with, I should say.
And like Mimi said, it's where you live too. Like I'm in Sebastopol in a low fire hazard zone, and Mimi's up in Cloverdale, and Roberta's in Ukiah-ish area.
Lake County.
Yeah, Lake County. So you just have to really think about your risk too. Yeah, where you live.
Yeah, I think we're okay on time. I did want to call out something that was mentioned in Mimi's discussion about raking the leaves away from your house. That's really difficult to keep up with in general. And my recommend is when you get the order or the notice that of warning that you might be evacuating, walk around the outside of your house. If you've got a rake that stuff away from your house as much as you can before you leave, before you get the order to evacuate. Because those stuffs, you know, you could have raked them last weekend and they're there again today.
Yeah, I know it's nonstop, but I'm also more vigilant if we have a red flag warning. I'm out there doing the work in case I don't have time. You know, if you get a go order and you have to go and you don't have time, you know, whatever prep you can do on a red flag warning day is really critical. I mean, we had a fire start north of just like a half mile north of my house earlier this year. And all I had time to do was pack the car and, get the cats in the carrier. And, then, we were watching to see if we were getting a go order, but you might not have the time. So the red flag warning day is a great time to do that as well.
Next question, are rocks good for defending the house from fire? I know what you mean, but I'm gonna play with that. I think if Rock Hudson was here with a firefighter outfit on in his younger years, he would be great at defending a fire. But in terms of hardscaping, I think hardscaping is very important. It's a wonderful option, especially in the 0 to 5. I used to go to the nail salon until I started hardscaping my backyard with pavers and masonry work, etc. I've been working on it for a year. I think it's quite beautiful, and I do have retaining walls now with soil in there. I'm getting ready to plant, and I have gravel or hardscaping in the 0 to 5, and it looks pretty good. So yeah, any kind of hardscaping you can do, at least in the 0 to 5
Yeah.
non-combustible area, and even beyond that, if you can pull it into the architecture, in a stunning way that's appealing to you.
So I feel like the word of the night is balance, and it's all a balance. And we are big advocates of the ecosystem services that our landscapes can provide, not only from a beauty perspective, and we talked about like the, kind of, environmental considerations with tree shading for energy conservation, or but also from a biodiversity support perspective. What we plant in our gardens matters. And so we're certainly not advocating moonscapes with all rocks. That's not something we advocate, but it is about looking at your 0 to 5, especially considering your fire severity zone, and trying to break up organic matter areas with hardscape to break up the risk of fire. I don't know, April, if you would want to add anything more on that.
Well, I just want to add that you should come next week to my
Yes.
because we will
Well
have a lot
done.
of tips and tricks and
Yeah.
all kinds of images to help you with this.
Well, perfect plug. Perfect. Okay. I'm just gonna give this to you outright. Mimi, does the tree spacing mean we should remove trees that are closer than 10 feet? We kind of discussed that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so no, you really need to assess, we're hoping we're giving you a framework to look at your landscape in a different way. And look at, what your risk factors. Maybe you're really pruning out the canopy of those trees and making sure you've removed any dead plant materials. Or, if you do have a large grouping of, densely, closely planted trees, and it's in your 5 to 30 foot zone, maybe you do want to consider a removal of a tree for spacing. But it really is, I think each landscape is unique. Each individual's situation is unique. You need to assess your own personal risk factor and then make decisions that are, appropriate. But, certainly during high drought, it seemed a little easier to suggest it might be a good opportunity to remove some, shrubs or trees if you want to be making your landscape more fire prepared. But it's hard to say, yes, you should remove any tree if it's closer than 10 feet. I certainly would look at pruning it, maintaining it effectively, and then making a balanced decision based on your overall landscape.
Yeah.
April, would you add anything to that?
I think that's perfect. I think I'm finding clients needing to defend their trees around their house for insurance, and Roberta probably knows about some of this. And so I think, like Mimi said, really cleaning them up and sending pictures to your insurance agency that this is part of where you live in this environment. If you live in Oak Woodland or a redwood forest, and really, like, I hope that people will defend their trees as well, knowing that you did do all the other defensible space work and try to keep your trees.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is to not have your house right in the forest of trees. So make sure that even if you have trees near your house, at some point create a break between that and the rest of the forest so that there's a
Like a
place,
shaded fuel break, like a
a
shaded fuel
place for the
break.
fire to stop.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love that, because we don't talk enough about shaded fuel breaks, but I think that that is something that we could go into deeper. I'll try to next week.
Next question, how can a tree be within zone 0 and be 5 feet away from it can't. We're working on defining this kind of hair splitting in Oakmont. Very eager to hear your example. Unfortunately, my experience in talking with a lot of people about this is that many, if not most of the insurance companies are using what's called the IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home Standard. And that standard says no combustible material in the 0 to 5. And that would include a wooden tree. And yeah, again, my oak tree is within that 5. If I don't meet that IBHS Wildfire Prepared Home Standard. And so I would probably fail an insurance adjuster's visit. Even if I told them, well, I have defensible space around that tree, they're gonna probably laugh at me. But yeah, I think there might be a little confusion there about the distancing and
And the
stuff.
trunk, it's the trunk versus the limbs as well. I know that many of us, like my trees are not, like the trunk of the tree isn't in the 0 to 5, but the limb, the whole rest of the tree is over my house. Right?
That came up as a conversation with some folks in Oakmont recently. The question became, what about the eaves?
Yeah.
You know, so I believe that the IBHS standard, I have it in front of me. I could look it up if I have the time, but I don't. I believe that the IBH standard basically, as I interpret it, says if this is the side of your house, then 5 feet out from grade to forever, that's the distance, nothing combustible. So if your tree is here and it overhangs your house like this is too close. Now then the discussion becomes, well, do you go around the eave that 5 feet, or is it from the wall surface all the way up through the roof to infinity?
It's
I
like
don't
a bubble.
know.
I'm understanding that from the insurance inspectors for my clients, it's a bubble around your house.
That makes
It's
sense.
where we're at
Yeah.
right now. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's gonna change, but it makes me feel better that I can say we have this bubble around our house.
Yeah.
5 to 7 feet. I mean, obviously, we've talked about 6 feet above, limbing up above the house, I think is safer and all that kind of stuff. So right now, just talk to your adjuster. And I think that they've been, I've had some really good experience talking to them, but think of a bubble around your house.
Yeah, does a 5-foot tree limb away from chimneys apply to homes not in a WUI, but within Santa Rosa city limits? Yes, it's in the fire code, which is, the California Fire Code is enforced in every municipality statewide as a model code. And then City of Santa Rosa also has more restrictive regulations, not necessarily specific to chimney distance to vegetation, but with a lot of other things. But yes, whether you're looking at the state code, California Resource Code, or the California Building Code, it's all don't have limbs around your chimney unless you're not ever using it. If you're in a municipality that doesn't allow what they call a decorative wood burning appliance inside your house, then probably not as important. But if you're using that fireplace, please don't have anything around it. I've been to a lot of chimney fires. What about crushed walnut shells as mulch? Supposedly fire resistant, but I don't believe it. That's a great question. I'm gonna just give that to you guys because I have
Well,
no
okay.
idea. I love it.
It's organic, so it will burn. I haven't seen any research studies on walnut shells flammability, so I couldn't speak to it being fire resistant. I certainly would want to see a research studies to support that. I've never seen walnut shells used as mulch. April, have you?
I had time, I would look it up. I'll try to look it up this week and see if we, I
Okay.
know cocoa holes, but I've never seen the walnut shells.
Yeah, me too. I've heard of cocoa holes, but not walnut shells. So
That's gotta be killer expensive.
unless you have a bunch of walnut trees on your property.
Oh, yeah, true, true enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I would want to see a research study that supports, you know, whether it's
I'm
less
gonna-
flammable. And I don't know that I would ever see a research study that would probably have that, because normally they're studying what, you know, readily available landscape
Yeah.
materials. So
Regardless, I think the next time I'm at the grocery store, I'm gonna get a bag of walnuts and toss the
Oh,
shells on the barbecue,
okay.
see what happens.
Well, here it
Okay.
is that we're in Yolo County said that they're widely available there. So, yeah, I would want to see if there was research to support that.
Yeah. Next question, when is Sonoma County's fire season and is it the same every year? It used to be years ago that the state fire would establish when fire season would occur. And then at the county level, for example, when I was a county fire marshal, I would write the county ordinance declaring it fire season on the backs of when CAL FIRE said it was going to be fire season. And then that'd go before the Board of Supervisors for ratification for the year, because the some regulations apply during fire season as opposed to not. However, it's not done like that anymore. Each municipality or government set of legislators will declare fire season based on their local knowledge of, you know, what the fire is likely to be, what they expect. And so no longer is it set, I forget the day, you can almost expect. It was May 5 to, I don't remember when. You know, it's predictable. I just use the same ordinance every year. But now it's based, it's more, I like it better now because it's more science-based. It's based on current conditions and evaluations by people that are expert at such things. And it is geographically specific. So it doesn't matter. I think you should employ most, if not all, of these practices regardless. Is there a map that shows where 4291 is enforced in Sonoma County? Yes, if you, oh, I'm sorry, did anybody else want to add to that question?
No, you got it.
Oh, okay, I almost skipped a question.
That's okay. Do you want to go to 4291 and then
Yeah,
we'll go back
since
to the
we're
other one?
in that space.
Yeah.
So, the Public Resource Code 4291 is mostly enforced by CAL FIRE, State Forestry, and it is enforced in what they call SRA areas, state responsibility areas. If you Google CAL FIRE FRAP, F-R-A-P, you'll get to their set of maps, and you should be able to, without too much noodling around, find a map in California that shows the SRA areas as opposed to local government. And that'll show you where it is. But to be quite honest with you, in most cases, the state regulations are less restrictive than local regulations. Let's see. Okay, so back to the one with Johanna. We have about 6 acres sloped. I'm still slugging with old oak tree canopies, trying to hold on to them for ecological aspect. Thank you. We have vineyard on one side, but wildland on the other. Canopies meet and provide a good amount of shade, lots of wildlife, etc. Love to get more into the canopy issue. These oaks are in all spaces around the house, which is pretty much centered on the property. I would try to create a break in there somewhere. Mimi, what do you think?
So, how lucky are you? And I have some, you know, beautiful old oak canopies just down the slope from my cottage, thankfully, because we lost that one oak, but we still have some beautiful oaks there. Implement your defensible space. You know, I would be vigilant, you know, about oak debris in your 0 to 5. You know, watch your ladder fuels under the oak trees, which I suspect you don't have. And, yeah, implement your 5 to 30 with, implement your defensible space. It doesn't mean you have to remove all those oaks. Yeah, I don't know, April, what would you add?
No, I think that's perfect. I'm back to making sure that you don't have that ladder fuel. And like Roberta was saying, like make sure you don't have to take oaks out, but you could have an area, if you do have a lot of understory planting, to make sure you clear out a nice 10-foot, break in the understory to make sure that the fire from coming from the outside in has a place to stop in that landscape.
And I'm so sorry, Joanna, that to hear you've already been dismissed from insurance.
Yeah.
And if the insurance, no matter what we say, if your insurance cover says you have to do something else, and that's what you have to do to maintain your covers, that's what you have to do. And I'm so sorry to hear you've been dismissed from your.
Yeah, if you want to keep your insurance, or if you have to because you have a mortgage that requires it, it's quite a colorful space right now. We need to replace our wood decks soon. Any suggestions for wood versus alternate materials? Anna, thank you for this question. I was just thinking about this, I think yesterday, driving from here to there and mulling that question around in my own mind. And then it occurred to me that, you ever notice when you go to like a outdoor football game in high school, when you're sitting on the bleachers are made out of this aluminum decking material. And I thought to myself, if I ever redo my decks, I'm going to go find out how to get that material and use it for my deck. And just use that aluminum planking. It's like, 10 inches wide, I think, of various widths. They use it to make aluminum bleachers out of. Why not that? That's my current recommend. And there's all kinds of products. I would take a look at the products and their level of fire resistance compared to the level of risk you want to undertake and how much you can afford. I'm sure the aluminum deck is going to be pretty pricey, but metal deck. What some people have done is they'll build a wooden superstructure and put lightweight concrete on the deck as a surface. That could work really well. At a minimum, if you are using a wood product, you want to keep a good finish on there that's, heavy, thick, something that is gonna, if a ember landed there, would reduce the chance that ember is gonna actually make contact with the combustible wood and burn. I was someplace recently sitting at a picnic table, and the picnic table had like probably 20 layers of paint on it. And I'm looking at it thinking, hey, you guys, if an ember landed here, it probably would do pretty good, right? And they're all like, yeah, probably. So, I'm not sure if that helps, but, hopefully that's some food for thought. Anybody else want to elaborate?
I don't really have any expertise in that area, so.
Yeah. Anonymous attendee, you guys are going to love this one. How to find a good gardener. Many don't now know how to keep canopy clean.
April, do you want to talk about our outreach?
For now, we're gonna send out links and such in our final email or email about this talk, but I would come to Jennifer's talk in 2 weeks about maintenance. And I would also look to calscape.org, where there's a professional training certificate that folks get to have. And so they have a list on calscape.org of people that have been through the training, at least for professional landscapers working with natives. I don't know about the canopy issue right now, so hopefully we can address that maybe in the last maintenance.
I will say also, as part of our grant funding from County of Sonoma, we have a component where we're trying to reach professional landscapers with this content. But please, share the information with any landscapers that you're considering. We really are trying to help educate more people on the topic, and lots more work to do.
How are we on time?
We're just a little over time. Do we want to wrap up with just
I
a,
mean, if I could do this,
Yeah.
I know we are paying the Spanish translation and others. So I know we're gonna have to close quickly, but if you guys don't mind, would you mind if I grab the questions that I feel like I can respond to because they're related to construction?
Yep.
And then, the rest we can probably tackle next time around. Okay, so, how is the fire code enforced? Fire code is enforced by fire officials, either the county fire warden in the case of county government, fire marshal in the case of local municipalities, and by firefighters and fire inspectors in all aspects of the fire service. If you're a fire inspector, you are a sworn officer, and you are technically a law enforcement official. So when you write that, code compliance notice, technically you have to correct it, or you could be in violation, and it could carry the load of a misdemeanor. I have taken people to court for code violations, believe it or not. People do go to court for code violations from time to time. And so that's how it's enforced. I'm not sure about CAL FIRE, but I know when I worked for a local municipality, we were pretty serious about code enforcement. And also as the county fire marshal, we were pretty serious about code enforcement. Regarding chimneys, what about gas inserts? I have a, which don't emit. No, I would still say the code applies. If you are using your fireplace, the code applies around your chimney, 10 feet around the opening. You don't want to interfere with the draft either. If you get some of that tree overhanging there, it's going to start messing up your draft, and your chimney's not going to pull the, the products of combustion out the way it should. I'm not gonna do that one. Kim Badge, says, if you are using a wood deck, does it have to be higher resistant compared to other? Not,
oh, I think he's asking about epay, which is a specific hardwood.
oh, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's it's like one of the hardest wood types you can get.
I'll
So
make sure to bring up that in the next talk, because there are a few wood products that.
Yeah, you should be able to look up a wood and discover its flame surface burning rate. With most woods, they will test them and rate them in terms of their surface burning characteristics. Like, for example, and they're all based, believe it or not, on wood as the control. And it's done in what's called the Steiner tunnel test at the United Laboratories, UL Labs. And yeah, for example, pine burns very fast, very hot. So it's not a great wood, not as combustible, or not, is more combustible than oak. And some woods are less combustible than oak. Your harder woods tend to be less combustible, and more fire resistant, if you will. Good.
And Roberta, do you have any experience with fire resistant paints or applications that people do on wood decks or wood structures? Do you have any experience with that?
Other than they're expensive, but I recommend them. If that's an option for you, definitely, if you can afford it. I don't think the state fire marshal has listed / approved any fire resistant paints yet officially, but we've seen from empirical evidence that they work. And that the reason that the state fire marshal's office is reluctant to rate them, because they have to give them like a fire resistance rating, like the 20-minute rating or a half-hour rating or a 1-hour rating, and they're not able to do that. So for example, if you wanted to use that paint as part of a 1-hour assembly and count the paint as 20 minutes of that 1-hour assembly, that would count. But in terms of resistance to a wildland fire, if you can afford it, if I could afford to repaint my house in a fire resistant paint, baby, I'm doing that.
And then can I suggest, so for the tips on design, install hardscape materials on steep slopes, I'm hoping perhaps April can touch in on that in her presentation next week. That's a very complex topic, on slopes. And the question about plants in ceramic pots within the 0 to 5 foot zone, we should be, if you're, you know, part of the code requirement that's coming out from the state of California, I think there's supposed to be guidance on that topic from some early stuff I saw, within University of California advisors trying to consult on that. But sure, but make sure they're movable if you know, if especially if it's woody and
Well,
you need to move it on a
yeah.
red flag warning day, right?
Yeah, even a wood pot can be movable outside of that area, but you know, just remember, unless you're growing a rock plant, you know, you're gonna have something combustible in there.
It's combustible.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, hoping, that the
But-
question
but-
around the wood deck replacement was maybe addressed by,
Yeah, I
birders
think
in
I
their
felt
context.
like it. Yeah, redwood's a softer wood than, you know, hardwood. I think redwood's classified as a quote unquote softwood. So it's gonna be more easy to ignite than say, you know, not like Doug fir probably. You know, and a lot of people say, well, redwoods are fire resistant material. They're not gonna burn. The wood itself will, the dressed wood will, it's a softwood, it'll burn. The thing with redwood trees is their bark is extremely fire resistant. In that it acts almost as a fire resistant paint in terms of the science behind it. Because as it burns and chars, it creates a fire barrier to the core of the tree, very much like a fire resistant paint would do, you know, physically and chemically anyway. Anyway, hope that answers all the questions. And thank you guys for hanging out. We saw 57 people here, which is
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you for you hardcore folks hanging out, and thanks for the team. Thank you to Julie Burns. And is she by herself today, or does she have a helper?
There was a second for keeping up
Lorna
with us.
Silva, Lorna Silva.
All right, thank you both for hanging in there with us and doing the Spanish translation. Good job. I hope, I'm sure we can make it harder or easier on you guys. Hopefully we made it easy. Thanks to the team. Check us out, Resilient Landscape Coalition. Lots of good stuff there, lots of videos from earlier days that are evergreen, good information. Check it out.
And
thanks to the-
definitely,
uh,
everyone who registered will get an email from us with the resources list and a copy of the recording, and we hope we see you next Tuesday at April's Great Plants presentation, and then in 2 weeks at Jen's maintenance presentation. So I hope we see you all again.
Yeah, and I'm gonna miss next week's. I'll be on a panel talking about insurance someplace. And so I'm gonna miss you guys, but I'll be here for the module 4 at the end.
We'll miss you. Thanks,
Thank you,
Roberta.
Roberta.
All right, see you
Bye,
guys.
everybody.
Have a nice evening.